The night was neither cold nor warm, it simply was. A space stretched in quiet stillness, like a held breath before the first word is spoken. The traveler walked with slow, deliberate steps. He was not hurrying toward anything, nor escaping from anything. And yet, something followed him, or rather, stayed with him. It was not a person, nor an animal. It was not a sound or a shadow in the ordinary sense. It was his own fear, given shape by time, nourished by memory, and carried with every footstep like a quiet companion that never truly spoke, but was always felt. He did not name it. He had learned long ago that naming a thing gave it a place, and he was not yet ready to give his fear a place. The moon hung overhead, a pale observer. The stars blinked slowly, as though tired from watching so many stories unfold across the ages. And in that sky, in that hush, the traveler whispered, not to the moon, not to the stars, but to the thing inside him. "I don't know where we're going, but we'll keep walking." And so they did. The traveler had been walking for many days. He could not remember how many, nor did he care to count. His boots were worn, not from distance, but from softness, each step a choice, not a command. The landscape around him was vast and gentle. Rolling hills that never rose too sharply. Trees that leaned inward, as if listening. And the wind, oh, the wind, it spoke without speaking. Sometimes it told him stories he did not understand. Like the memory of a mother holding a child in a storm. Or a bird who once forgot how to fly. Or an old man who whispered a truth on his deathbed, and no one heard it. These stories passed through him, not to burden, but to remind. Everything that ever happened echoes. Even the things we wish to forget. That's when he first noticed the river. It was not wide. It didn't roar or crash like rivers in the north. It hummed a low, endless hum, like a memory remembered in the background of a dream. The traveler approached it cautiously. Not with fear, but with the respect one gives to something ancient. At the bank, he sat. He did not dip his hands in. Instead, he listened. And the river whispered. "Do you remember the first time you were afraid?" The traveler blinked. He didn't answer. The river didn't need him to. Instead, the water showed him, not in images, but in feeling. A younger self, standing in the dark, waiting for a door to open that never did. A child holding a secret he was too afraid to share. A teenager walking away from someone he loved, because it felt safer than being left behind. The traveler closed his eyes. The river spoke again. "You have walked far. But you have never stopped to listen." And so he did. He sat by the river for what felt like days. Maybe it was days. Time doesn't move the same way near a river like this. Each night, the traveler lay beside it, and each night, the river offered him another echo. Some were his. Some, perhaps, belonged to others. Pain is not always ours alone. It moves, it transfers, like music passed between hands. On the third night, the river showed him something he had long buried. It was raining. He saw himself, younger, more rigid, standing in a room filled with boxes. He was leaving. Someone else stood across from him, a friend, or perhaps more. Someone with kind eyes. The younger traveler couldn't speak. His lips were still, not because he had nothing to say, but because he was afraid to say it. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid of being known. The shadow stood behind him even then. "If they see you, they will leave," it whispered. So he walked away. Silently. And he never turned back. The traveler, sitting by the river now, opened his eyes. Tears didn't fall, they weren't needed. What needed to move was already moving. He reached down, and for the first time, touched the river. It was warm. That night, the traveler built a small fire near the water's edge. Not for heat, the night was gentle, but for companionship. The flame flickered, just like his thoughts. And beside him, the shadow sat. He didn't speak to it. He didn't need to. But he did something he had never done before. He acknowledged it. He turned slightly, just enough, and said softly, "I know you're tired too." The shadow didn't vanish. It didn't smile. But it softened. And in that stillness, beneath stars that had seen everything and judged nothing, the traveler fell asleep. Not without fear, but with acceptance. The traveler awoke with the faintest imprint of a dream still clinging to his skin, like morning mist on leaves before the sun reaches them. He did not try to hold on to it. He had learned, over time, that some dreams are meant to fade and some return when needed. He rose, folded his blanket, and nodded gently to the river. It didn't speak, not this morning. It had said enough for now. He walked onward. The land shifted beneath his steps, not suddenly, but gradually, as if the earth itself were sighing into a new shape. Trees grew thinner, more upright. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old glass. Then, just as the sky was softening into its pale afternoon hue, the traveler reached a town. It was not marked by gates or walls. No one welcomed him. And yet, it seemed alert. Not alive, but aware. He passed between narrow paths lined with tall mirrors. Some stood alone like sentinels. Others leaned in pairs, forming arches overhead. There were no houses. No people. Only reflections. And every mirror reflected him. But not always as he was. In one, he was hunched in gray, his eyes filled with exhaustion. In another, he stood proudly, wrapped in the robes of a teacher, though he had never taught. In one mirror, he saw himself as a child, wide-eyed and shaking, holding a wooden toy that he lost long ago. Some mirrors showed him turning away. Some showed him alone. Some showed him running. "What is this place?" he whispered. The shadow answered, not aloud, but through sensation. "This is the place where fear takes shape." He kept walking. At the town's center stood a great mirror, taller than any building he had seen. It curved slightly inward, like the belly of the moon, and shimmered as though it were made not of glass, but of memory. He stood before it. At first, nothing appeared. Just sky. Trees. His own figure. But slowly, gently, the mirror began to shift. And there, before him, he saw the version of himself he feared most. Not broken. Not evil. But forgotten. A version of himself who had lived a quiet, small life, who had never spoken truthfully, never risked love, never left the village. A version who had never walked. And the traveler felt a pang. Not of shame. Not of anger. But of sadness for all the selves we leave behind when we choose a path. "I could have been you," he said. The reflection nodded. "And I still am." The traveler stepped back. He understood. We do not destroy our fears by fighting them. We soften them by witnessing them. By allowing them to exist without running. He turned and left the mirror behind. The town did not stop him. It never had. As he walked away, the mirrors began to dim, not from darkness, but from peace. He passed by one last reflection, and in it, for the first time, he saw the shadow standing beside him. But it wasn't looming. It simply stood. Beyond the mirrored town, the earth began to rise. Not abruptly, but in long, slow curves like a song reaching the chorus it had waited for. The hills were gentle, mossy, and quiet. And within them, hidden behind a wall of ivy and thyme, was a door. The traveler almost missed it. But the shadow slowed. And the traveler listened. He turned, brushed aside the hanging vines, and found the handle. It was cold. Smooth. Worn. He opened it and stepped into the library beneath the hills. The air inside smelled of old parchment and calm dust. Shelves stretched endlessly, forming narrow corridors. Books were piled high, not chaotically, but as if placed there by someone who knew what they were doing. There were no lights. And yet, the room glowed. He walked slowly. The books had no titles on their spines. Some were wrapped in soft cloth. Others were bare. A few were so small they could fit in the palm of his hand, while others were large enough to sit on. And then, he heard the voice. Old. Warm. Tired. You've come a long way to read things you already know. He turned. An old man sat by a desk, quill in hand. He wore glasses that seemed too heavy for his nose, and a robe that had been mended in 27 places, the traveler counted, instinctively. Who are you? He asked. I write down what people forget, the old man replied. Not because they mean to forget, but because they were too afraid to remember at the time. The traveler looked around. What is this place? A library. But not of facts or stories. It's a library of selves. The man gestured toward the shelves. Each of these contains a version of someone. A version they never fully became, or one they lost along the way. Some are healed. Some are hurting. Some just want to be seen again. The traveler moved to a shelf. He reached for a book. It was lighter than it should be. He opened it. No words. Just a single image, himself, sitting beside a younger version of himself, offering him tea in silence. That one, said the old man, is from the day you chose not to speak. But your heart still made the effort, even in silence. The traveler swallowed gently. He pulled another book. This one showed him standing in a field of people, speaking. His voice clear. Calm. Respected. A version of himself that might have been. The old man nodded. Some versions never bloom. But they still grow, quietly, inside. Then the old man did something unexpected. He handed the traveler a blank book. This one hasn't been written yet. Because you are writing it now. The traveler held it carefully. There was no rush. No pressure. Just possibility. He turned to leave. Thank you, he said. The old man smiled. We are all made of chapters we don't read until later. Keep walking. As the traveler exited the library, the hills seemed to nod in understanding. He paused at the doorway and looked once more at the blank book in his hand. The shadow leaned closer, not threateningly, but curiously. Is that me? It asked, not in words, but in feeling. The traveler smiled. No, he said. It's us. And then he continued. Not away from fear, but with it. The sky was darker now, but not from clouds. It was the kind of darkness that comes before a choice, not ominous, but heavy with quiet meaning. The traveler walked until he came to a narrow ridge. There, rising from one cliffside to another, was a bridge. It was long, thin, and swayed softly in a wind that didn't exist. The ropes were knotted in places. The wood was aged. It had no rails. Below it was not a river, nor rocks, but mist. Thick, endless, and echoing. He paused at the edge. The shadow stood beside him, still and watchful. "We don't have to cross," it said, not as a warning, but a suggestion. The traveler looked ahead. The bridge seemed to stretch longer the more he stared. "What's on the other side?" The shadow didn't answer. So he took a step. With each footfall, the bridge gave a soft creak. Not threatening, but alive, as if it, too, had seen many people cross it and fall, not from danger, but from turning back. Halfway across, the mist below began to shift. He heard voices, not around him, but from inside. "You're pretending again. This isn't who you really are. You're only brave when no one is watching. You will never be enough." The traveler stopped. The wind picked up. Or perhaps it was his own breath, too quick to control. The bridge swayed gently, as though inviting him to feel unsteady. The shadow moved in front of him. For the first time, it spoke directly, voice clear, slow, soft. "You've carried me this far. Let me walk this part for you." The traveler looked at it. For a moment, he felt tempted to let it take over. To let the part of him that feared control him, just for a little while. Because fear knows how to survive. But then, he placed a hand gently on the shadow's shoulder. "No," he said. "But you can walk with me." They stepped forward together. And the voices began to change. "I see you now. You're not alone. It's okay to be afraid. Keep going." The bridge grew steadier with each step. Not because it changed, but because he did. At the far end, the path opened into a soft meadow. The stars above began to reappear. He looked back at the bridge. It no longer looked dangerous. It looked sacred. Beyond the bridge lay a garden. Not of flowers, but of objects, forgotten things, half-buried, lovingly placed. A wooden comb. A cracked mug. A child's sandal. An old journal with its pages curled. A broken compass, still pointing north. The air was warm here. Peaceful. Still. A wind passed now and then, not to stir, but to listen. The traveler stepped among the objects slowly. He did not touch anything. He only observed. Each item held a story, not loud, not even clear, but present, like a scent carried on the breeze of memory. Then, he saw her. An old woman, sitting in the middle of the garden. Her hands folded, her eyes closed. She breathed as if she had all the time in the world. "Are you the keeper of this place?" he asked gently. Her eyes opened slowly. "I am the one who remembers what others have chosen to forget," she said. "And why do they forget these things? Because they no longer fit who they're trying to be." She smiled kindly. "But that doesn't mean they're not sacred." She gestured toward a low bench. He sat. "What have you forgotten?" she asked. He paused. Then he whispered, "I forgot how to cry when it hurt. I forgot that I once loved singing. I forgot what it felt like to be held without needing to explain myself. I forgot how afraid I was when I first left." The old woman nodded. "All of those things are here. Somewhere in this garden. Not to be reclaimed, but to be acknowledged." He looked at the objects again. Suddenly, he saw things that were his. A scarf his mother once wrapped around him. A poem he wrote and never read aloud. A stone from a path he never took. "Can I take them with me?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "You already do. You always have. But here, they rest. So you don't have to carry the weight of remembering. He lowered his head. What happens to the things we leave behind? They become part of the ground that grows your next self. The traveler stood. He bowed slightly, not from obligation, but from gratitude. Thank you, he said. The old woman smiled. You are becoming lighter. That is not weakness. That is grace. As he left the garden, the sun had just begun to rise. Not brightly, but softly, like light waking up from a long dream. The shadow followed him still. But now, it walked at his pace. Quiet. Calm. Companion. The path was no longer winding. It stretched forward gently, a long, flat trail of soft earth and morning dew. There were no more signs. No more forks. Just clarity. The traveler walked slowly. Not out of weariness, but reverence. For the first time in his journey, the road did not ask anything of him. It simply received his steps. The wind whispered, but held no warnings. The trees stood tall, not to block the sky, but to frame it. And the sun, not yet full, warmed only what was needed. The shadow followed still. But it no longer clung. It no longer pressed or pulled. It simply was. He came to a clearing. There was no sign to mark the place. No monument. Only a great, wide space, open sky above, gentle grass below, and a stillness so complete it felt sacred. The traveler stood at its edge. He inhaled. The air tasted of quiet things. Of old prayers. Of unsent letters. Of rain that had not yet fallen. He stepped into the field. There was no destination here. Only presence. He walked to the center, sat, and did something he had not done since the beginning. He closed his eyes, not to escape, but to arrive. Candle the shadow's voice. From beside him, the shadow stirred. Its voice was softer now, not from weakness, but from peace. You've brought me far. The traveler nodded. And you've brought me here. The shadow sat, folding itself into the grass like smoke into water. Do you still fear me? It asked. The traveler smiled gently. No. I only forget, sometimes, that you are trying to protect me. The shadow was silent for a long while. Then let me protect you in a different way. Not by making you turn back, but by reminding you that you can rest. The sky turned blue, then silver, then a quiet golden gray, the color of surrender. Birds did not sing. Not because there was danger, but because even joy had gone to sleep. The traveler lay down. He looked up. He saw nothing. He saw everything. The memories did not flood in. They floated, light as feathers. Moments of shame now softened into wisdom. Moments of loss now woven into meaning. Moments of fear now framed in understanding. The shadow lay beside him, not cast, but curled. And in that moment, he did not resist it. He held it. And in return, it held him. The grass around him bent slightly, as if bowing. The air grew warmer, deeper. It was the kind of warmth not felt on skin, but beneath it. A warmth that tells the body, you may let go now. He closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to be still. Not to forget, but to remember, gently. Time passed, or perhaps it didn't. In places like this, time no longer ticks. It breathes. The wind moved once more. And in its motion, there was no command. Only a blessing. Be soft, it seemed to say. You have survived. You may now simply be. And now, dear listener, your journey too may soften. You do not need to defeat your fear. You only need to walk beside it until it no longer leads. You do not need to fix everything tonight. You only need to rest. Let your breath grow slower. Let your thoughts wander gently. Remember, stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the presence of peace. Let this story end not with a lesson, but with a quiet truth. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to stop running. You are allowed to sleep. And so, sleep.